Okay, let me speak on something which is an area of passion for me, Mother India. I'm sure you guys are aware that this year India's GDP crossed the GDP of the UK, right? You guys are aware of that? Yeah? When was the last time India's GDP was greater than that of the UK? Anyone has read Angus Madison's data? Angus Madison, everyone's heard of Angus Madison? This British economic historian. So when was the last time India's GDP was greater than that of the UK? No, actually early colonial times our GDP was still higher than the UK. It was around 150 years ago, okay, that the land of India, that our GDP was greater than that of the UK. That was a time when the British Raj was still running the biggest drug smuggling racket in the history of humanity. You guys are all aware, right? The British Raj was built on drug smuggling. Everyone knows that? Yeah, they wrote, as Calcutta author had said, essentially Queen Victoria was essentially Dawood Ibrahim with better headdress. They used to grow opium in India. Millions of Indian farmers died because of that. Man-made famines that they created, and they smuggled opium into China. Millions of Chinese died, becoming drug addicts. That's how actually the British Raj moved ahead of us. But anyway, 150 years ago, our GDP was greater than theirs. We just moved ahead of them this year. A round of applause, man. India has achieved something. Most economic historians, or rather economists, will tell you that on a purchasing power parity basis, India's per capita GDP, per capita income, will probably cross that of every single European nation's per capita income in the next 25 years. Which means every average Indian, okay, will have a greater GDP, greater income on a purchasing power parity basis than every average European. Anyone knows when was the last time that happened? That every Indian was earning more than every European. Anyone knows when was the last time that happened? On average.
So maybe
again, Angus Madison, data is there.
So maybe before we started getting invasions.
Before we started getting invasions, around 900 years ago. Okay. So what we lost in 150 years, we made up in just 30 years post 1991, because till 1991 we weren't really growing. In fact, we were still falling. Between 47 to 1991, if you read 𝘂𝗶𝗶𝗶𝗶𝗵's data, we were still falling. It's only post 1991 till mid 1990s, because economic reforms took some time to bear out. What we lost in 150 years, we made up in 30 years. What we've lost in 900 years, we'll make up in the next 25. When we Indians get our act together, we move very fast. Applause, yeah? But the key thing that then we have to think about, because it will happen in our lifetimes, is because if every average Indian's per capita income is higher than every European's income, we will obviously be a superpower, right? What kind of superpower will we be? That is a key conversation that we must have. What kind of nation will we be? How will we treat our fellow Indians? How will we treat, other nations? Will we be, like the superpowers who oppressed us? Will we be like them? Or will we be like our ancestors? Will we make our ancestors proud? For example, I'm very proud that everyone knows that we sent vaccines, right, to Africa? And everyone knows, I'm sure you guys are all aware, that the Western countries had excess vaccines. They allowed those vaccines to expire, but they did not send them to Africa. And I'm a diplomat now, I meet African diplomats. You have no idea the kind of anger that there is among African diplomats. Because the West talks a good game, oh, we will do human rights, blah blah, blue blue. But basically they allowed their vaccines to expire. मतलब किसी ने इस्तेमाल नहीं किया, कबाड़े में फेंक दिया, but they did not give it to Africans, right? But who sent? India sent, right? Which makes us, in my opinion, morally superior. Will we be a superpower like how other countries were, or will we be better? And what kind of balance should we have? You know, we should be good to other countries because we are different from others, right? But we shouldn't be so nice that people come and walk all over us. How do you find that right balance? Yeah, I think that is a perfect conversation for us to have over the next few years, few decades. What kind of country will we, because you guys will be leading the country in 15, 20 years. And so what kind of nation should we be? I think that's a conversation worth having. But I will also say we shouldn't get complacent. One of our problems, I think, to be honest, in our community, in our land, is we declare victory very early, right? एक बैटल जीत गए, अरे ये तो पूरी वॉर हमने जीत ली, अभी ऐश करो, right? We have to keep working hard. Nobody is going to guarantee us, great status. We have to earn it. We have to fight it. In fact, people will fight us. People will oppose us. Why should they make it easy for us? Right? And those are conversations which I think are worth having. Okay. What do you? If it's easy, it's not worth it.
So I don't think a lot of you know, but Amish had a lot of interest in history. You even inspired to be a historian at one point in time.
I did. I grew up in the 1990s though. So obviously I would have been told history ठीक है बेटा काम क्या करोगे? So I didn't take up history as a career, but I loved history as a subject.
Sir, I read somewhere that you found some ambiguity in Indian and Persian texts, and that is when you actually thought about writing your first book. So why don't you tell us more, what the exact inspiration behind your first book?
So the first book actually began as a conversation, Immortals of Meluha began as a conversation within my family. My family and I, we were watching TV and we discovered something interesting. What are gods called in the Indian way? Devas? Yeah, Deva. And what are anti-gods called? I won't use the word demon because demon is a very loaded word. And our perspective didn't see anything in pure black and white. We saw things in shades of grey. So what are anti-gods called? Asuras. So what we discovered, which was very interesting, is that for the ancient Persians, the gods were called Ahuras. I'm sure you're aware, in the ancient Persian language they can't pronounce Sir. So Sir becomes Her. Yeah? So which is why Sindhu became Hindu for the Persians. So Asura became Ahura. And their anti-gods were called Daivas. Okay? It's the exact opposite of our pantheon. So then our family started talking that if the ancient Indians, ancient Persians had met, we'd probably be calling each other evil. Then who would be right? Who do you think would be right? Indians obviously, or did the Persians also have a point? They could have a point too. In fact, you discover when you read the ancient Avastan scripts and stories and ours, you realize actually we are cousin cultures. Ancient Persia and ancient India. We are actually cousin cultures. And it was like परिवार में लड़ाई हो गई. Okay? But परिवार एक ही था. But in any case, if neither the ancient Indians or the ancient Persians were wrong or evil, then the question arises, what is evil? So evil is something that exists beyond petty human rivalries. So that's an answer that occurred to me, that how about we explore that, an answer to this question, what is evil? And then the story grew as a wrapper around this philosophy. How do I convey this philosophy through a story? A philosophy of what is evil. Best hero to tell that story, the destroyer of evil himself, Lord Shiva.
So it was like a dilemma, like who should be right, Chandravanshi or Suryavanshi?
Correct, and you realize evil is actually beyond that. Evil is beyond petty human rivalry. So I have some theories on what I think is perhaps turning evil today, what we should be mindful of. Fossil fuels, for example, was good once upon a time, right? Because today's average middle classes lead lifestyles that even the royalty couldn't have lived 200 years ago. Correct? What is at the root of it? Cheap energy. Where does cheap energy come from? Fossil fuels.
Yeah.
Right? But excess use of fossil fuels is perhaps turning it into evil. Yeah? Are our mobile phones good? That is, could be turning into evil? Yeah? Mobile phones have been very good for us. We have access to knowledge. We can speak to anyone. We have the powers each individual with a mobile phone has powers that the gods couldn't have imagined, right? And yet, so many of us are completely getting drawn into mobile phones, so much hatred being spread through mobile phones, immorality, debauchery, so many other things, right? So, could it be turning it evil? Right? Mobile phones are good for you. Excess use of mobile phones, not good for you.
So, power that even gods could not have imagined is essentially turning us evil. Could be turning us evil.
The greater the power, the greater the risk. That's the point. Among the things I always say is actually our scientists are giving us powers that I'm not so sure we can handle. Are we spiritually and mentally capable of handling those powers? You don't know the kind of tech that's coming out. It's a matter of time. There's the Singularity University. How many of you guys have heard of the Singularity Institute University in California? Yeah? You have to go and see the lectures and the kind of tech that's being developed out there. It's fascinating, right? They are talking about essentially, inserting, chips, etc., tech into our bodies, right? Something can be inserted into your mind which will give you access to the internet in your mind. You can just think it and the answer will come up, right? With tech and with gene repair, is theoretically, it could happen in the next 15-20 years that people could live up to 200 years, 250 years, like in the Shiva Trilogy, right, with Chopras. There's in University of Austin, there's research happening that you can kind of wear a cap and with that hear the thoughts of the person in front of you. These are the powers of God, man. Are we capable of handling this? Or will these powers given to humanity at this stage be like giving an AK-47 to a 5-year-old kid? What do you think will happen? Are we even spiritually, mentally, emotionally capable of handling these powers? Western civilization is certainly not. Right? Can India rise to the occasion of creating a sense of culture where people are actually capable of handling these powers?
And sir, before asking the question, I would like to tell you that I can feel that enlightenment radiating off from you.
मैं कोई बाबा नहीं हूँ. I'm just an author.
So, sir, actually, I have heard in a lot of your interviews that you said that you were born in a family जिसमें सरस्वती माँ की कृपा थी, लेकिन लक्ष्मी जी की उतनी ज़्यादा कृपा नहीं.
लक्ष्मी माँ थोड़ी दूर रहती थी हमसे.
So, you used to read a lot of text.
Yeah, that was during my grandparents' generation. Then what has happened over every generation कि सरस्वती माँ की जो आशीर्वाद है धीरे धीरे घटता गया है, लेकिन लक्ष्मी माँ का आशीर्वाद थोड़ा बढ़ता गया है.
So, sir, it's like that you were groomed by reading books and all those things. So, and we can see how you have become now, how enlightened sage kind. So, how do you think, sir, the loss of true Indian text has affected our present status?
Terribly. First, that we don't have that strength of character that our text can give us, which is very sad. But it's not just in our characters. I've spoken about the character already. And those are things, hopefully, as we read more, there are many more, just like you who are interested in our texts, in the Vedas, in the, there are many Gitas. It's not just the Bhagavad Gita, the 𝗥𝗲𝗃 Gita, there's so many. You can grow mentally, spiritually, character-wise, but our education system being so cut off from India has a real practical impact as well. Because we are all so mentally colonized. Because the British had a very clear this thing, पढ़ा लिखा के Indians को अंग्रेज बनाओ basically.
Yeah, even I read one letter where one of a higher authority British said that it would take us more than 500 years to colonize India completely if we don't change their education system.
Yeah.
If we don't take their culture.
And India did have an education system. It's not that the British created it for us. Read The Beautiful Tree. But the impact of this education system, you can see it. We built glass wall buildings in Indian cities, which makes no sense. Glass wall buildings make sense in Western Europe where there's a shortage of the sun. Does India have a shortage of the sun or an excess of the sun? Excess of the sun, right? Glass wall buildings, when you have a sun shortage, it makes sense. Because in Western Europe, remember, they don't spend energy to cool the building down. They spend energy to heat it up. But there the problem is cold. But in India, when you build a glass wall building, you're essentially building a giant microwave oven. And then you have to blast energy to cool it down. It makes no sense in India. Only reason we do it, we are also mentally colonized. सब architects को अंग्रेज बनना है, यूरोप में बना रहे हैं, चलो यहाँ पे भी बनाते हैं, क्या logic है?
Yeah, even they set up that criteria that this is a design which is used in Europe.
It makes no sense. The way we design our life, right? I want to give you one practical example. Think about the way our cities and our houses are designed, right? Pop quiz, what is the Sanskrit word for year? Year, a year. मतलब the Hindustani word is saal. What is the Sanskrit word? Varsh. Yeah, applause for you guys. Right answer. What is the Sanskrit word for country, nation? Varsh, Bharat, Varsh. Correct. What's the root of this word? Very obvious. Huh? Varsha, rain. Applause. Who said that? Yeah, applause for it. Yeah. The root of this word is Varsha. Our ancestors kept reinforcing through the education system, through everything, that our way of life has to be built around the rains. They were very, very clear. The Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia, the only parts of Earth which has this climate system called the monsoon system. Think about it this way. All of you guys will graduate, you will get salaries, right? Unless you start your own business, you will get salaries. Now imagine if you got your annual salary in this manner, that for 10 months you get 0 and for 2 months you get everything. Yeah? How should you live your life? Should you blow everything up in those 2 months and then starve for the next 10 months? Or should you save in those 2 months? Logical, right? Now imagine further complexity in those 2 months. Sometimes you get 150% of your salary. Sometimes you get 50% of your salary and then you can't predict it. So what should you do even then? In those extra 150, keep capacity in your savings bank account that you save the full 150%. So that you can use it in the year you get 50%. Our ancestors built our cities, villages, everything around this. Every temple, every mosque, you notice in ancient times, what did they have next to it? Pond. Logical, right? The pond was owned by the community, by the village, which would do shramdan to deepen the pond, maintain it. Why? Because when the rains came, if there was, you got a 150% bonus, save it all and then use it. The community had to work together. Correct? Otherwise, because to further complicate, you're not getting the salary individually. Your entire housing society is getting the salary. Correct? And you have to manage it across all. Our ancestors understood this and managed and built cities accordingly. What do? We want to copy European cities. So you will find every year, some of the other Indian city floods, Chennai floods, Bangalore floods, Mumbai floods, Delhi floods, and then next year water shortage. Right? And then we'll have these newspapers saying, what can we do? Cloudburst, it's climate change. This India boss, cloudbursts have been happening every year for the last 20,000 years. The monsoons happen out here. What do you expect? But we think it's climate change. It's not climate change. It's climate change if there's a cloudburst over Saudi Arabia. If there's a cloudburst over the Indian subcontinent, it's not climate change, it's the weather. It's what happens. Right? Our way of life was built around it. We see water as a problem. Right? We are not understanding it's actually our entire annual salary in a 2-month bonus. We would know that if mentally we were living in India, but mentally we all want to live in Europe because our education system makes us that. And therefore we keep having these problems. So there's a real world, it's not just character and spirituality, there's a real world impact of us being so colonized.
So it means that the text taught actually gave us a way of living.
Exactly.
Not just
we have to be aware of where we are living. The only cities we can learn from is perhaps Southeast Asia. There are perhaps some things we can learn from Europe, America, but they don't have a climate system. There are some things which are specific to India. have you noticed that in most other parts of the world, the rains, like in Western songs, rains are considered as something sad, right? Yeah? You are my sunshine, you know, the rain took it away, something like that. Yeah? Whereas, how are the rains seen in Indian songs? Love, beauty, correct? Where do you think that comes from? I'm just trying to explain how climate impacts how we see life. How our ancient way of life is still a part of our mind, our emotions, without us realizing it. India was, you know, the only land on earth where the winds change direction like clockwork is the Indian Ocean. Yeah? So which is why the Indian Ocean was the hub of global trade routes. You can't trade that much on ship and oxen, on Silk Route, जो Central Asia से जाता था. Real trading happens on ships, right? Northeast monsoon में ships would sail out of India. Southwest monsoons is when ships would sail back into India, right? So that was when actually the husbands and lovers returned home, and the wives would sing "Mera piya ghar aaya," right? And that thing remains in our mind to this day. It shows how climate impacts the way we think. We see the rain as something lovely, right? Historically. But in the modern world, we see the rains as city flood ho gaya, headache ho gaya. Correct? We are not seeing it as boss. अपने को bonus मिल रहा है.
Yeah,
Save this.
We should save this.
Yeah. Will you complain if you suddenly get all your money in 2 months? Will you? Arey, why am I getting it now? I don't want this money. Will you say that? Or will you say, yaar, अच्छा है, save करो. Correct? We would know that if mentally we were actually living in India, but mentally, sadly, and I'm not saying it's your fault. Our education system does that. Mentally, we are living in Europe.
So we already talked about the concept of evil. Now let me ask you something exactly opposite. What do you think about the concept of God? And concept of God.
God.
Yeah. And how do you think that the concept of God help impact the future of mankind?
Do you know what this means? Namaste? Yeah? What does it translate into? Sorry? I bow to? Slightly more. I bow to what? In you? Applause for him. Applause for Sir out here. He's right. I bow to the divine within you. Right? So in our way, actually, we believe that the divine is in everything. Okay? Not just in those we worship as gods, but in all of us. And not just in all of us, in all animals, all trees, the rivers, the mountains. So we are natural environmentalists, because we don't see earth as a resource to be exploited. We see the earth as a goddess to be worshipped. Right? We see the divine in everything, and I find that very beautiful, because it naturally makes us respectful of others. It naturally makes us respectful of the environment, and that is, there are various theories around the divine in the Indian way. In the Indian way, there's nothing wrong with being an atheist as well. But the theory I find most inspiring is this of seeing the divine in everything.
How exactly will this affect the future that we have? Will we start respecting each other more? Because this concept still exists, but people are not we do namaste to our elders, but we are not always respecting them.
Good point. So if that comes to the point I was making of us decolonizing and making our character who we are, because are we living in an age of globalization? Yes? Do you suspect it will probably remain this way, or do you think it will end? What do you think? Has technology made deglobalization very difficult? It will remain, right? In some form or the other, right? How do different civilizations actually learn to get along? If the civilization has an attitude, my civilization is the only true civilization, I have to kill or convert you if you don't agree with my civilization, or you will burn in hell for eternity. Is any dialogue possible? Dialogue is possible in a thing of mutual respect, where actually we have something to say. So I actually believe India has answers for many things that plague the world today. You know, in the West, I live in London right now. In the UK, they had a minister for loneliness. Does anyone know that? Seriously, I'm not joking. They had a minister for loneliness. Okay, because they have destroyed so much of their community, family structure, etc. People are so lonely. Okay, during the COVID time, there were people dying at homes alone. Bodies weren't being discovered for months. Can you imagine? ये इंडिया में ऐसा होता है क्या कभी? Correct? Because there's so much loneliness. There are deaths of loneliness now out there. So they actually had a minister to solve it. Can the state solve a loneliness problem, or will your friends solve it? If you're lonely, do you want some bureaucrat to come and tell you, are you lonely? Can I help you? Fill up this form in triplicate. Yeah, and then I'll see what you can do with loneliness. I'll take your PAN card, Aadhaar number. Huh? Or do you want your friend to come and put his arm around you and say, क्या हुआ boss? Problem क्या है? Okay? Yeah. Is in the West, their destruction of family, communities, etc. has opened the space for liberalism, which is good, for women's rights, for LGBT rights. But they've destroyed their traditions, which leads to an epidemic of loneliness, which is not good. In many Middle Eastern countries, their traditions are strong, which is good, because their families are strong, their communities are strong. Loneliness is not a problem out there. But is there space for liberalism out there? What happens to LGBTs in many of those countries?
No, not liberal.
They cannot live. Literally, they can't live. Some of them have death penalties. Women don't have equal rights. So that's not good. India is perhaps our only place. Our traditions are such. We can have liberalism and traditions at the same time. I can be deeply traditional and be respectful of LGBT rights as well, because our traditions respect it. I can be deeply traditional and respect women's rights because our traditions respect it. So India has many answers for the world, but then we need to learn it first and then spread it to the rest of the world. So our approach, I really think it has answers for the world today.
So sir, for the next question, in one of your, even now you said that India was extremely, people used to collect the water in the ponds together. You emphasize that word, I mean I got that. So even in one of your old interviews you said that India was very united in the first millennium, like 1000 years ago. And that was the reason why we weren't affected by invasions. Invasions happened at that time also. So sir, how do you think can that unity be brought back again in the people? Because now it's a situation of a lot of unrest amongst people. People fight. So how do you think can we bring that back?
It's just a simple mindset shift. All of you have families, right? Anyone will raise their hand that every single person in their family agrees on every single thing. Does anyone have a family like that?
No.
Huh?
No.
Do you have differences? Logically, na hoga. Does that mean you say I don't have a family? No, na?
Absolutely.
It's actually just in the mind. You will have differences, but we are all the same family. But if you stop believing in that, because I've seen in some societies where families break up, family structures have become so weak. You know, in the US and UK, a majority of the children are born out of wedlock. Do you know that? They're born to single mothers. Can you imagine the upbringing they're getting? Because the poor mother has to work hard to earn money. There's no one to take care of the child, right? The child is brought up usually in daycare. Can you imagine the upbringing they're getting, right? Why is that happening? Because if they have differences, they start believing that they are divided. Right? So actually, a lot of it is just in the mind. It's just one decision. Whatever our differences, we are Indians. If we are clear on that, the divisions will not impact us. If we start hating each other more than loving each other, I know it sounds very diabetic, but actually it is as simple as that. That I am very, very clear that a fellow Indian of mine is more important to me than anyone outside. I am very clear. As long as all of us are clear on that, we'll stay united.
So what do you think caused that mindset shift in the second millennium?
It's something that needs to be studied. I don't know why. You know, could it be that Dr. Ambedkar had theorized that the caste system became rigid around that time? That could be one reason. Could it be that there were other differences? I don't know. But we haven't studied our own history enough to understand what happened to cause this decline. Because we like to believe that invaders attacked us and therefore we declined. So I suspect that actually the decline happened Hence we started losing, not the other way around. And we have to think about why the decline happened. Could be internal divisions, could be loss of scientific temper, could be catastrophic success. Anyone knows this term, catastrophic success? कि आप इतना successful हो जाओ that it makes you lazy, fat and lazy, and you start declining. It happens to very big companies, right? You see, they do very well. They take everything for granted. अरे हमें कौन हराएगा? Correct. India was so far ahead of every other land for the first millennium. Perhaps our ancestors got complacent. Everyone's heard of this company Intel in IIT, of course. Intel, yeah. Andy Grove, you heard of him? Yeah. So he'd written this book, Only the Paranoid Survive. Okay, so you have to have that fire in the belly all the time. Keep thinking, how are other countries doing? How are we competing against them? Moment we start getting complacent, catastrophic success, basically. Some Western countries are frankly becoming that way now. Catastrophic success, they're complacent.
So we had a session yesterday on Indian education system, and we were talking about how we should be studying history in a way that we're learning, we're not memorizing the facts, and we're actually learning the concepts behind it. Like the mindset shift that happened, we should be knowing why that happened. So what do you think are the changes that can be made in the Indian education system? So that essentially those things are happening. We are learning what was the mindset, we're learning what went wrong instead of learning the dates of that particular event happened.
Because history should teach us something, and the first thing that I think we need to learn is our history is more the history of our invaders. Sanjeev Sanyal had said that. We should learn the history of our own ancestors. But then we should learn themes which can be useful, for us. The history of Indian sciences, for example. History of Indian philosophies. Why did we decline in the second millennium? Learn these themes so that we can learn something to apply in our life today. History should teach us something for actionables today. Memorizing dates doesn't help.
So we'd like to open the floor for audience now. Anyone having a question for me, sir?
You can raise your hands if you want to ask.
The mic will be delivered to you.
Can you get a mic please? Yeah.
So my question is a little bit historical. What are your views on Aryan invasion theory? Is it real or so? What are your views on that?
I'd written an article once that, at least in my opinion, from all the texts that I have read, the Aryan invasion theory was the greatest piece of fiction composed by the British since the plays of Shakespeare. In fact, even many of the historians who supported Aryan invasion theory now call it the Aryan migration theory, because they found no archaeological evidence for an invasion. See, when invasion happens, you should see destroyed cities, mass battles, वैसा कुछ मिला ही नहीं, which is 3,500 years old. So they are saying Aryan migration, but even that should show up in a massive infusion of gene pool, right, from Central Asia. A lot of, have you heard of, everyone's heard of the find in Sanoli in Western UP? Yeah, and that is dated at least 4,000 years, at the minimum 4,000 years. So, which is right at the peak of the Indus Valley, what is called the Indus-Saraswati civilization. But it's in UP, far away from, on the Ganga Valley. And it is a highly developed, it clearly shows a highly developed race. And they had horse chariots. That's what they found. So, which blows the, the thing that bhai Aryans came with horses, quote unquote. It kind of blows that out of the water. So there isn't enough evidence to take it for a fact. Scholars should debate this. I'm not a scholar. Scholars are those who study primary texts, things written in Persian, in Sanskrit, and then translated into secondary sources which are non-fiction scholarly books. And then the job of public intellectuals and storytellers is to read those scholarly books and then translate it into stories and articles, right? So scholars need to debate this, and I would suggest we should have open debates, like this on two sides, like the way we used to have in ancient India. Those who support the Aryan, or even the supporters don't say Aryan invasion now, Aryan migration. So say like Witzel or Robila Thapar on this side, and those who oppose it like say 𝘂𝗵𝗃𝗶𝗵 or Sanjeev Sanyal. We should have these open debates. It'll be great fun to watch, right? But at least in our history books, we should show that there isn't enough evidence to support this, and there are various other theories. Okay, and it's open to question. Out of India theory, Aryan invasion theory, or there was no infusion at all. So also even in literature, you'll find that when invaders come, they extol their homeland and speak about how they conquered this race, right? Like how 𝗂𝗂𝗏 does, correct? But the quote-unquote Aryan texts, the Vedic texts don't say that. In fact, they celebrate India as the homeland, which doesn't make sense logically. And invading, like the British texts of the invasions into India, they don't say India is the holy land. They say England is the holiest land, and Indians are dirty people that they have civilized. Correct? That's how invaders tend to talk. It's very unlike invaders to come in and then say this is our homeland. It's not the way invaders talk. Right? At least I haven't come across any case like this.
Sir,
Namaste sir.
Whoever's
मेरा नाम अभय है and my question to you, as you said,
I can't hear you clearly. Can you just hold the mic closer?
sir, my name is Abhay.
Yeah, Abhay.
My question to you is, as you said that people of India are more influenced by the European civilization rather than having so rich Indian culture. So what are the steps you think that we should implement in our education system to promote the other way of thinking?
Well, all our subjects need to be decolonized. There's a new national education policy that's come out. It's not just history. Every single subject needs to be decolonized. In mathematics, everyone's heard of Pythagoras theorem? Yeah? Raise your hands if you haven't heard of Pythagoras theorem. Okay, thankfully no one. Everyone's heard of Pythagoras theorem, right? Okay. Now, raise your hands. How many have heard of Bodhayana? IIT, so a reasonable number, thank God. Bodhayana ji, I'm sure you're aware, discovered Pythagoras theorem before Pythagoras did, 200 years prior. It's there in the Shilpa Sutras. But that's not taught to us. Right? Where's the zero meridian? Correct. Right, applause for him. Because today people believe it's in Greenwich. But in ancient times, it was actually in Ujjain. Right? What was called Avanti in those days. And it's a logical place to have the zero meridian because the Tropic of Cancer also bisects out there. So the sun is right overhead at summer solstice. At Greenwich, the sun is never right overhead. So time calculation isn't that obvious, right, out there. Every single subject, astronomy, mathematics, medicine, we need to decolonize. I've got nothing against Western knowledge. We must learn it. Goddess Saraswati can bless anyone, not only an Indian. So if she has blessed someone, we should learn it. But first we should learn our own. So every single subject needs to be decolonized in our education system, consciously. Literature, we don't teach our own stuff. It's much more private place to Shakespeare and Tennyson. Again, they are good, but teach our own stuff first. The past should essentially be used to drive the future. And if the past can be used to drive unity, then it's good. Right? And drive the success of India. We shouldn't make up facts. But the point is, how do you interpret the past? Right? How do you interpret the past that you bring India together now, but without making up facts? How do you interpret the past so that you give momentum to India's growth now, without making up facts? Right? That would be a good use of history. Because essentially, look, any philosophies that you learn also, it's not just mental calisthenics, it should actually work in your life. Right? That's the purpose of philosophy as well. So that's the way our ancestors used to do education too. Is everyone aware of the college debt issue in America? Everyone's aware of that? that there's a massive, there's so many students with huge amounts of debt, which the jobs they got wasn't able to pay it off. You guys are aware of that? And the American government is writing off those debts in billions of dollars. And the obvious question that came up then was, why were the universities teaching those subjects? Ideally, you should learn something which should help you in life, no? If you're learning something where you spend so much money that you can never recover it from the job that you got, then what's the point of what you've learned? Eh? The university education should add up to something, right? Otherwise, it's in a way a waste of time. So we need to learn philosophies, but which makes us better human beings today, not philosophies which are just naam ke vaste. That's the Mahabharata philosophy. The Mahabharata is a lot about utilitarian approach. How do we make people more productive, society more united in the today's day? That's the way history should be taught as well, I think.
Ma'am, you raised your hand. Can you please ask, right?
Good evening, sir. My name is Vidhi. I wanted to ask that, sir, in your books, you give a very logical reasoning to a lot of things. Like, people live for very long because they have sombras, antioxidants. It's contrary to how we have heard about, mythological tales, because they have been told to us in a very, magic and divine way, like only gods have the power to do that. So, sir, you as an individual, do you totally disregard the fact that, there were things that could have not been physically possible, like in magic and all of that existed back in those days?
You'll find that our stories, the soul is constant, the soul is ancient, but the interpretations keep changing depending on the age. Right? Why is that? Because each age has its own idiom, its own zeitgeist, its own kind of the mood of the age, right? And what our stories, what our ancestors, the culture they set up, was that if you actually adapt the story slightly, just the clothing around it, to match the mood of the age, you keep the story alive and fresh, right? If you read the original Valmiki Ramayana, outside of the Uttarkand, Lord Ram is actually portrayed as a human being. Do you remember the boon that Ravan had asked for in the Valmiki Ramayana? What is the boon he had asked for from Lord Brahma? What is the boon? Who couldn't kill him? Anyone knows? He said no Devas, no Gandharvas, no one could kill him. The only thing he didn't ask for was a man, because he believed, how will a man defeat him? Which is why Lord Ram was actually born as a man, right? In the Valmiki Ramayana, Vishnu Dev, who was Lord Vishnu, was actually born as a man. That's the interpretation in the Valmiki Ramayana. It's a devotional Ramayana later, the Kriti-Bhashi Ramayans, Ramcharitmanas, Kamba Ramayana, which actually saw him as divine through and through. In the Valmiki Ramayana, it was Lord Vishnu was born as a man, because only a man could kill Ravan because of the boon he'd got. And then, of course, then in Uttarakhand he was aware, and then he went back. My perspective was actually that showed the mood of that age. Okay. And then when many of these devotional Ramayans came up, it showed the mood of that age. I think, because I don't write for any audience, I just write the way it comes to me. But every generation has a mood, right? Like my generation, I'm 47 years old. So slightly older, slightly younger, we had this mood of endless rebellion, our generation. Which is why so many in the slightly older generation went into Naxalism and all that. There's no logic to it, we just wanted to rebel. Which is why Amitabh Bachchan's Angry Young Man was so popular. Right? Because we were in a rebellious mood. That was the mood. What is the mood of the present generation? I suspect that the present generation is driven a lot by rationality. They want to question. Right? Among the things the parents always tell me is, आजकल के बच्चे सुनते नहीं हैं. Whereas I think it's not कि सुनते नहीं हैं, they just want a logical answer. आप ये कह रहे हो तो मुझे समझाओ, मैं ये क्यों करूँ? आप समझाओगे मैं करूँगा, लेकिन मुझे समझाओ. Right? Maybe that's why my books are popular with the youth, because It's not that I was planning it. It just happened to be in tune with the mood of the age. And will a time come 50 years, 100 years later when we may like fantasy once again? Yes. Right? Then the stories will change again. That's the beauty of our way of life, that we keep the soul of the old, but we add in, new clothes every few centuries, which makes it relevant to the day again. That's what Goswami Tulsidas ji did with the Ramcharitmanas. Uttarakhand is there in the Valmiki Ramayana. Is it there in the Ramcharitmanas? Anyone knows? Uttarakhand. Ramcharitmanas mein. Where does it end? Does Lord Ram give up Sita Ma in Ramcharitmanas?
Yeah.
No, no? No, he doesn't. Only in the Valmiki Ramayana, not in the Ramcharitmanas. Correct? Sorry, what? There is a scholarly view that Uttarakhand was interpolated later. Yes, I agree with that. But in the critical edition, Uttarakhand is there in the Valmiki Ramayana. Correct? So, but is it there in the Ramcharitmanas at all? Did Lord Ram ever give up Sita Ma? No, in the Ramcharitmanas. So what did Goswami Tulsidas ji do? He just took the Ramayana, adapted it to his day, right? But respectfully. None of this, these days people have this nonsense of creative liberty, which I think is a very Western concept. It's like you're rebelling against something. No, it's a respectful interpretation at the feet of the God you worship, right? And that's what actually our ancestors did again and again. Kept the beautiful soul of the old, add in something of the new, right? Which makes it relevant to a new age.
So, sir, since we are running short of time, this was supposed to be the last question. And sir, before the session ends, I just want to ask you that since you have a very calm, composed, behavior, attitude.
Calm and composed vibe we're getting to.
So, I just wanted to ask that life becomes like a roller coaster.
कुछ angry young man act कर दे यहाँ पे.
So life becomes like a roller coaster, ups and downs once we reach college and even after that. So what is your advice to the students who are present here? Like they are generally in a situation of turmoil, what we should do, what we shouldn't. So what can you say about that?
Very good question. This is one of the things we can learn from Lord Ram. If you notice Lord Ram's life, do you agree that he suffered a great deal through his life? He suffered a lot, right? Did Ravan suffer a great deal through his life? He also suffered. The difference between Lord Ram and Ravan, I think, besides of course that Ravan had a massive ego, Lord Ram was very humble, but among the things I think that one can learn was how they reacted to their suffering. Ravan reacted to his suffering with anger, rage, grief. The world hurt me, I will burn the world down. Did he make things worse for himself or better for himself with this behavior? Worse for himself. Lord Ram, how did he react to all his suffering? The more he suffered, the more noble he became. The more he suffered, the more calmer he was. It's not that it reduced his suffering, but his actions did not make things worse. His actions ensured that at least he didn't cause more problems. Correct? So actually, I think that's one of the things we can learn from Lord Ram, how to react to suffering. All of us, life has its ups and downs. There will be times in your life when you will be blessed with more than you deserve. 100%, take it and guarantee from me. There will be times like that. You will get more than you deserve. And there will be times in life where you will suffer far more than what is fair. 100% guaranteed that will also happen in your life. This is the nature of life. Utar chadav hota rehta hai. How we react to all of this is what defines what our life is. If we react to our success with arrogance and देखो मुझे मैं तो tiger हूँ, you will not be able to sustain it. If you react to grief as world hurt me, मैं पूरी दुनिया को जला दूँगा, that will also not help. You have to react to both suffering and grief, or rather success and failure, joy and grief in the same calm manner. Keep the core within you stable. Then you will notice you will actually handle life quite well.
Thanks a lot. So that was really like flowing through what. And also guys, we have Nidhi Tripathi between us. She is the National General Secretary of Vidyarthi Parishad. So please give a huge round of applause for her. So anything you want to add before going?
No, before I go, I just want to say one thing. You guys are from IIT. You are the leaders of future India. This is perhaps one of the best times in the last 1,000 years to be born in India. So work hard, make your parents proud, contribute to our great motherland, take it back up to where Mother India deserves to be, right at the top.